Hi guys. So, I am going to have that video out soon of the boss kill compilation for the cooldown recovery trapper, but in the meanwhile, I still want to be trying to provide fairly consistent content. That is a personal goal for me this league, and in line with that, I've collected a whole bunch of tips that I've been giving out to people on my stream for how to survive Scourge. And these are not presented in any sort of order, and I have tried to gather a number of things that are applicable to a wide variety of builds. So hopefully there's one or two things on this list that you could work into your own character if you are struggling with Scourge survival. Warping into the alternate reality and just falling over now and again. Now, the first tip is to, and this is a pretty darn basic one, be pretty wary of the stacks that you're getting. In softcore, obviously, you can push it to the max, but in hardcore, I very rarely try to push past, say, 150 to 180 stacks of the Scourge debuff, as that is one of the most dangerous things about this mechanic, and it can be kind of a quiet killer, because if you're not watching the number up there in the top left, it will slowly ramp to the point where the things that previously at the start of the map may not have even tickled you are suddenly dangerous threats. So if you're dying at the end of maps when you're pressing that Scourge button for the last couple times really, really frequently, maybe hold off on the last jaunt or two until you can improve the character a bit. But as far as actual improvements to your character are concerned, the first thing that I would recommend is trying to use one of the soul lockout mods, and by that I mean you can get crafted mods or unveiled mods through Jun. You can get these on pieces of gear that can give you very powerful effects during Vol skill lockout. And Vol skill timing for Scourge is extremely, extremely valuable for survival. If you're playing a build that leans more on the evasive side of things, Vol Grace, especially if you have the spell suppression to make use of the unlucky spell damage taken while from suppressed spells while under Vol Grace, is insane for Scourge. And obviously, if you're an armor build, then Vol Molten Shell is great. And those by themselves will be extremely potent tools if you just Scourge in whenever you have it up, and then Scourge back out whenever it's down. But on top of that, on a shield, I believe on gloves, and on boots, you can get a mod that gives up to plus 3,000, even plus like 4,000 if you get the unveiled version, armor during Vol skill lockout, which activates instantly as soon as you press that Vol skill button, and you can extend the lockout duration, which normally is a bad thing, and is arguably still a bad thing here, as the Vol skill is powerful in its own right, but you can extend the duration of the Vol skill as well as the lockout by linking increased duration to any of the Vol skills that I mentioned. So you'll get that 3,000 armor for something nearing like 30 seconds, 25 seconds, somewhere around there, which obviously is more than enough for a jaunt into the Scourgeverse, and is twice what a Granite Flask can give you. That is enough armor that even if you're barely splashing armor on your build at all, while you're in Scourge, you're an armored up tank, and obviously armor was buffed pretty significantly this league, so definitely worth throwing onto your build if you're lacking for Fizz mitigation in the Scourgeverse. The next one, oft overlooked, glove enchants are actually, I would say, rather valuable for this mechanic, as one of the dangerous things about Scourge is the fact that the monsters will swarm you instantly on entering, especially if you're in a map where the enemies can't be stunned. Very dangerous map mod for this mechanic. And if you have Word of Reflection, the first couple mobs that hit you will spawn a mirror image of you when you get hit, and a bunch of the other monsters will be like, oh shit, that's the real one, and go and attack your clone instead of attacking you. This has saved the life of a hardcore character of mine 2 times so far this league, and I expect it to be very useful and possibly save my life again in the future if I make a mistake and jump into a pack of Scourge mobs when I really shouldn't. So I highly recommend Word of Reflection, but even if you don't want to go for that one, you can get, Word of Light, or the one with the name that I can't remember that causes chilled ground everywhere, which leads me into my third point here. Any kind of slow you can get your hands on, if it's decently consistent, is super valuable in Scourge. Because again, what we're dealing with the threat of this mechanic is there's tons of monsters that are moderately powerful individually, swarming you all at once. And one of the best ways to mitigate that is to slow them down so they can't get on top of you before you have time to react. And you can do that with a number of different tools. The obvious ones are things like Temp Chains as a Blasphemy, and if you're playing some sort of poison build, it can double as a damage scaler for single target. Or Aspect of the Spider, which is just generically good in every build. But if you can't fit those in, because they are a little expensive in terms of reservation, you can go for a Jewel with either Maim or Hinder on hit, depending on if you're doing attack or spell hits. And as I mentioned, you can get the Chilled Ground Glove enchant. Or you can even use my final tip here. Even on non-trapper builds, Siphoning Trap is an incredibly underrated tool. Up until this league, it was really difficult to use on non-trapper builds because the Siphoning Trap would just break as soon as you throw it and you'd get no benefit. But now traps innately cannot be broken for 2 seconds after being thrown. So if you take Siphoning Trap in a 2-link and just link it to Advanced Traps, which gives a ton of throwing speed, so you don't need to pick that up on gear or on the tree in order to have a comfortable throwing time, that will give you more regen than a level 20 Vitality while it's active. And you just toss one out when you hop into the Scourgeverse. Just throw that out at the start, and so long as you don't stray too terribly far from where you jumped in, you'll have more than a Vitality worth of life regen and even some mana regen to boot. I highly suggest just tossing that 2-link into your build and seeing if it feels comfortable to you while Scourging. Definitely worth toying with. You can even throw Bone Chill or Unbound Ailments into the links, or potentially both if you have 4 links spare, though most builds don't have that much space just sitting around. If you're playing a cold build and could benefit from the damage scaling from Bone Chill, or if you just want a more potent chill from the Siphoning Trap in order to slow enemies a bit more. And I did say that was the final tip, but there's actually one on my doc here that I missed. It's very quick. Upgrade your goddamn Pantheons. They buffed Pantheons so much this league, and a ton of people are still treating them like they're the red-headed stepchild living under the stairs, and they are not giving them the time of day. Upgrade your Pantheons. Get some Divine Vessels, it only takes 2 or 3, and upgrade those things. You can get crazy benefits. You can get Can't Be Frozen, obviously, that's one that most people are probably taking, but if you can get Freeze Immune somewhere else in your build, and Stun Avoid or Stun Immune somewhere else in your build, it's actually super rewarding to be able to swap to Lunaris, specifically for dealing with Scourge, because it gives you 8 Physmit, which is 2 Endurance charges worth of Physmit, and there's always 8 enemies near you in the Scourgeverse, so yes, it's 8 Physmit. And then the upgrade gives you 6% reduced LE damage taken if you've been hit recently. That is more mitigation than a point of max res, assuming you have 75 max res to begin with. Or is it equal? Math is hard. It's close to the power of a point of max res for just the cost of a Divine Vessel. That is so incredibly worthwhile. Definitely upgrade your Pantheons this league, and going forward, assuming they don't get nerfed somehow. Anyways, thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful, and click that subscribe button if it was. Stay tuned for further updates on my progress into the league and those boss fights from the CDR Trapper, and maybe check out the Twitch if you're so inclined. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.